The stagecoach thundered across the dusty plains of Wyoming Territory, 1876, its wheels kicking up clouds that shimmered gold in the setting sun as shots rang out from the ridge ahead. Inside, Rebecca Zimmerman clutched her leather-bound journal to her chest, the only possession that mattered from the life she was leaving behind. Rebecca had always considered herself a practical woman. At 26, she had resigned herself to spinsterhood after breaking off her engagement to the banker's son back in Boston. Her decision to accept the teaching position in Silver Creek had been met with disapproval from her parents, but she couldn't bear another day in that suffocating city. The West represented freedom, possibility, and perhaps a chance to become the woman she truly wanted to be. The stagecoach driver's panicked shout pulled her from her thoughts. "Bandits, hold on." The other passengers, an elderly couple and a traveling salesman, exchanged terrified glances as the coach lurched violently. The driver cracked his whip, urging the horses to greater speed, but the bandits were closing in fast. Through the small window, Rebecca counted at least 5 riders, bandanas pulled up over their faces, pistols drawn. "Stop the coach or we'll shoot the horses." One of the masked men shouted. The driver had no choice but to pull back on the reins. The stagecoach skidded to a halt, dust billowing around them as the bandits circled like vultures. "Everyone out," ordered the apparent leader, a burly man with cold eyes visible above his mask. "Valuables in the bag and nobody gets hurt." Rebecca's heart hammered against her ribs as the elderly woman beside her began to weep softly. The salesman looked as though he might faint. Outside, the bandits had surrounded the coach, weapons trained on the doors. That's when she heard a soft thud on the roof of the coach. The leader of the bandits heard it too. He tilted his head upward, confusion evident in his eyes. "What the—" He never finished his sentence. A blur of motion dropped from the roof, landing squarely on the bandit leader and taking him to the ground. Rebecca pressed her face against the window, straining to see what was happening. A tall man with broad shoulders had somehow appeared and was now engaged in a fierce struggle with the bandit leader. Rebecca caught glimpses of a weather-beaten Stetson, a dust-covered denim shirt, and the flash of determined blue eyes as the mysterious man fought with startling efficiency. "Get him!" shouted one of the other bandits, raising his pistol. The newcomer kicked the gun from the bandit's hand before the man could fire, then drove his fist into the outlaw's jaw with such force that the bandit dropped like a stone. 2 more rushed him simultaneously. The stranger ducked under the swing of one, sending him sprawling with a well-placed boot to the backside, then caught the other with an uppercut that sent him reeling. "Who is that?" whispered the elderly woman, her fear momentarily forgotten in the face of this unexpected spectacle. The remaining bandits seemed to be asking themselves the same question. 2 of them exchanged uncertain glances, then turned their horses and fled. The others soon followed, leaving their unconscious companions behind in the dust. The stranger straightened, adjusting his hat as he surveyed the scene. His breathing was only slightly labored, as if taking on 5 armed men was something he did before breakfast. He turned toward the coach, and Rebecca found herself staring into the most piercing blue eyes she had ever seen. "You folks all right in there?" he called, his voice deep and steady. The driver climbed down, shaking his head in disbelief. "I've been running this route for 15 years, and I ain't never seen nothing like that. How'd you get on my roof without me noticing?" The stranger offered a modest smile. "Caught sight of the bandits setting up their ambush when I was riding parallel to the ridge. Thought I might lend a hand. Name's Preston Parker." "Well, Mr. Parker," said the driver, extending his hand, "I reckon we all owe you our lives." Rebecca stepped carefully from the coach, her legs unsteady. Preston Parker turned toward her, and something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps, or something deeper. He quickly removed his hat, revealing thick sandy hair that fell across his forehead. "Madam," he said with a slight nod. "That was—" Rebecca struggled to find the right words. "I've never seen anything like it." "Just happened to be in the right place," he replied, his modesty seemingly genuine. "Where are you folks headed?" "Silver Creek," the driver answered, "though we're running behind schedule now." Preston glanced at the sun, now barely visible on the horizon. It'll be dark soon. There's a way station about 3 miles ahead. Might be safer to stop there for the night. The driver nodded in agreement. What about them? He gestured to the unconscious bandits. I'll tie them up and take them to the marshal in Silver Creek tomorrow, Preston said. They won't be going anywhere tonight. As the driver and Preston secured the bandits, Rebecca found herself unable to look away from their rescuer. There was something compelling about him, not just his impressive fighting skills or his handsome face, but a quiet dignity in the way he carried himself. Within minutes, they were back on the road, only now with Preston Parker riding alongside, his rifle resting across the saddle. Rebecca watched him through the window, wondering what kind of man could take on 5 armed bandits with nothing but his bare hands and emerge without a scratch. The way station was little more than a rough cabin with attached stables, run by a grizzled old-timer named Hank, who seemed delighted by the unexpected company. As the driver unhitched the horses, Preston helped the passengers inside. "Ain't much," Hank admitted, gesturing to the sparse accommodations. "Got a room in back for the ladies, and you men can bunk out here." Rebecca and the elderly woman, Mrs. Hollister, were shown to a small room with a single bed. "You take it," Rebecca insisted. "I'll make do with blankets on the floor." When she returned to the main room, she found Preston sitting alone by the fire, the others having already turned in for the night. He looked up as she approached, then quickly stood. "Miss," he began, "Zimmerman, Rebecca Zimmerman. Miss Zimmerman." "Couldn't sleep," Rebecca shook her head. "My mind is still racing from earlier. May I join you?" Preston nodded, gesturing to the bench across from him. In the firelight, Rebecca could see him more clearly, the small scar above his right eyebrow, the lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, the strength in his hands as he warmed them by the fire. "What brings you to Wyoming Territory, Miss Zimmerman?" he asked. "I'm to be the new schoolteacher in Silver Creek," she replied. "And you, Mr. Parker, what do you do when you're not rescuing stagecoaches?" A smile tugged at his lips. "Bit of this, bit of that. I was a cavalry scout during the war, then did some ranch work. These days, I mostly help the marshals track down troublemakers." He paused. "Teaching, though, that's honorable work." "I hope to make a difference," Rebecca said. "The children out here deserve a good education as much as any in the East." "You're from back east, then?" "Boston." "Though I fear I wasn't well suited to city life." Preston's eyes reflected the dancing flames. "The West has a way of showing people who they really are. Some can't handle that truth and run back home. Others find themselves for the first time." "And which were you, Mr. Parker?" He looked at her directly then, his gaze both gentle and penetrating. "I never had to find myself, Miss Zimmerman. The West is in my blood, born in a mining camp in Colorado Territory, never known anything else." They talked late into the night, Rebecca sharing stories of Boston society and her reasons for leaving, Preston speaking of buffalo hunts and cavalry patrols, dangerous outlaws he'd tracked, and beautiful hidden valleys where a person could forget the rest of the world existed. She found him surprisingly well-spoken for a man who claimed little formal education, and he listened to her with genuine interest. When Rebecca finally retired to her makeshift bed on the floor, her mind was filled with images of Preston Parker, the grace with which he'd moved against the bandits, the quiet confidence in his voice, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. Morning came too quickly. Rebecca awoke to find Mrs. Hollister already dressed and packing her small bag. "Your young man is quite something," the elderly woman remarked with a knowing smile. "He's not Rebecca began, then stopped at Mrs. Hollister's raised eyebrow. "I only just met him yesterday." "My Herbert and I knew after one dance," Mrs. Hollister said, patting her white hair. "Been married 53 years now." Rebecca felt her cheeks warm as she hurriedly dressed. When she emerged from the room, she found Preston already outside, the bound bandits secured to their horses. He tipped his hat as she approached. "Sleep well, Miss Zimmerman." "Well enough, thank you. Are you traveling to Silver Creek with us?" Preston nodded. "Need to deliver these fellows to the marshal, then I've got business at the Rocking P." Rebecca tried to hide her disappointment that he apparently wouldn't be staying in town. The Rocking P, my family's ranch, about 20 miles outside Silver Creek. Hope flickered within her. So you'll be nearby. Something in her tone made his eyes sharpen with interest. I reckon I will be. The journey to Silver Creek passed without incident, though Rebecca noticed Preston growing more vigilant as they approached town, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. When she asked about it, he shrugged. These bandits are part of the Hawkins gang. They've been terrorizing this area for months. Where there's 5, there's usually more. His words proved prophetic. As the stagecoach rolled into Silver Creek just after noon, gunshots rang out from the saloon. Preston immediately spurred his horse forward, calling back to the driver, "Get them somewhere safe." The driver guided the coach to the hotel, where Rebecca and the other passengers hurried inside. Through the window, she watched as Preston rode toward the commotion, the captured bandits still tied to their horses behind him. "What's happening?" she asked the hotel clerk. "Looks like the Hawkins gang is robbing the bank," the man replied, peering out beside her. Again. Rebecca's heart clenched with fear for Preston. He was outnumbered, and this time he wouldn't have the element of surprise. But before she could voice her concerns, the elderly salesman touched her arm. "Don't worry about that one, miss. Men like him are born for trouble." Outside, Preston had dismounted and tied the captured outlaws to a hitching post. He moved with careful precision toward the bank, staying low and using the buildings for cover. 2 bandits burst from the bank doors, bags of money in hand, and nearly ran straight into him. What followed was almost too fast for Rebecca to follow a flurry of movement, fists connecting with jaws. Bodies hitting the dirt within moments, the 2 bank robbers were unconscious, and Preston was collecting their weapons. He looked up, scanning the street, and for just a second, his eyes met Rebecca's through the hotel window. He gave a small nod before turning his attention back to the bank, where more shouting could be heard. Rebecca pressed her hand against the glass as if she could somehow reach through it to help him. She had known this man for less than a day, yet the thought of him being hurt made her chest ache. A gruff voice behind her broke the spell. "Miss Zimmerman." She turned to find a portly man with an impressive mustache regarding her expectantly. "Yes, Mayor Simmons, madam, we've been expecting you. The schoolhouse is all prepared, and Mrs. Simmons has a room ready for you at our home until more permanent arrangements can be made." Rebecca glanced back out the window. Preston was now working alongside the town marshal, leading more captured bandits into the jail. "Could we perhaps wait until things have settled down?" the mayor chuckled. "Of course, though you might as well get used to a bit of excitement. Silver Creek may look peaceful most days, but we have our moments." When the situation was finally under control, Rebecca stepped outside, her small trunk in hand. Preston was deep in conversation with the marshal, but he looked up as she approached, his face brightening. "Miss Zimmerman." "Glad to see you're safe. And you as well, Mr. Parker. It seems Silver Creek is more eventful than I was led to believe." The marshal, an older man with a silver badge that matched his hair, laughed heartily. "Don't you worry, miss. Most days are quiet as a church on Monday. And now that Preston here has helped us round up most of the Hawkins gang, things should stay that way." "Most?" Preston asked sharply. "Jed Hawkins himself got away," the marshal admitted, "but we got his brother and 6 others. That's a good day's work." Preston didn't look satisfied, but he nodded. "I'd best get these horses back to their owners. The gang had them stashed in the old Sullivan mine." Mayor Simmons stepped forward. "Parker, why don't you join us for supper tonight? Let us thank you properly." Preston glanced at Rebecca, then back to the mayor. "That's mighty kind, sir. I'd be honored." The mayor beamed. "Excellent. 7 o'clock. Miss Zimmerman will be there too, of course." As the mayor led Rebecca away to show her the schoolhouse, she looked back over her shoulder. Preston was watching her go, a look on his face that made her breath catch something between longing and determination. The schoolhouse was a simple one-room building at the edge of town, freshly painted white with new desks arranged in neat rows. Rebecca ran her hand along the teacher's desk, envisioning the children who would soon fill these seats. "Classes start on Monday," Mayor Simmons informed her. 23 students, ages 6 to 16. "It's perfect," Rebecca said sincerely. After settling into her temporary room at the mayor's home, Rebecca took special care with her appearance for dinner. She wore her best dress forest green with delicate lace at the collar and arranged her dark hair in a simple but elegant style. When she looked in the mirror, she hardly recognized the bright-eyed woman staring back at her. Boston seemed a lifetime away. Preston arrived promptly at 7, freshly bathed and wearing a clean shirt under his leather vest. His hair was still damp and he'd clearly shaved for the occasion. When Rebecca entered the parlor, his eyes widened appreciatively. "Miss Zimmerman," he said softly, "you look lovely." "Thank you, Mr. Parker, and please call me Rebecca, only if you'll call me Preston." Throughout dinner, Rebecca was acutely aware of Preston's presence across the table. Mayor Simmons dominated the conversation, regaling them with tales of Silver Creek's founding and growth, while his wife occasionally interjected with gentle corrections to his more embellished claims. But beneath the conversation, Rebecca felt an undercurrent of connection with Preston, exchanging glances that conveyed more than words could express. After the meal, Mayor Simmons invited Preston to join him for brandy in his study. Mrs. Simmons touched Rebecca's arm. "Dear, why don't you show Mr. Parker the garden before the light fades completely? The roses are particularly lovely this time of year." Rebecca caught the older woman's conspiratorial smile and nodded gratefully. "What a wonderful idea. Preston, would you care to see the garden?" The garden was indeed beautiful, with climbing roses along a trellis and neat beds of wildflowers. As they walked the stone path, Preston's hand occasionally brushed against hers, sending shivers up her arm. "I think Mrs. Simmons is playing matchmaker," Preston said with a smile. Rebecca laughed softly. "Is it that obvious? Small towns," he replied. "Everyone knows everyone's business, and a new schoolteacher and a single rancher make for interesting speculation." They stopped beside a rose bush heavy with blooms. "Is that what you are, a rancher?" Preston hesitated. "The Rocking Pea is my father's ranch. I help out when needed," but he trailed off, looking into the distance. "But," Rebecca prompted gently, "I've spent most of the last 5 years tracking outlaws for the marshals. After the war, I couldn't settle, needed to keep moving." He looked down at his hands. "My father thinks it's time I put down roots. And what do you think?" Preston turned to face her fully, his blue eyes searching hers. "Until yesterday, I wasn't sure. Now," he took a deep breath. "Now I'm thinking there might be reasons to stay in one place." Rebecca's heart beat faster. "Good reasons, I hope. The best." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Rebecca, I know we've only just met, but I feel." A shout from the house interrupted him. "Preston, Marshall needs to see you right away." Preston closed his eyes briefly, frustration evident on his face. "I'm sorry." "Go," Rebecca said. "We can continue this conversation later." He nodded, then surprised her by taking her hand and pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I'll hold you to that." Rebecca watched him stride back to the house, her hand still tingling where his lips had touched it. Whatever Preston had been about to say, she had a feeling it would change everything. The next morning, Rebecca awoke to discover that Preston had left town in the early hours. According to Mrs. Simmons, Jed Hawkins had been spotted near the Rocking Pea and Preston had ridden out with the marshal to investigate. "Will he be in danger?" Rebecca asked, unable to hide her concern. Mrs. Simmons patted her hand. "That young man has been facing danger since he was 18 years old. He knows how to handle himself." Still, worry gnawed at Rebecca as she prepared for her first day of teaching. She had expected to see Preston again before he left, to finish their conversation in the garden. The thought that he might be in danger made it difficult to concentrate on her lesson plans. Monday arrived, and with it came her students, a diverse group of children from the town and surrounding ranches. Despite her preoccupation with Preston's absence, Rebecca threw herself into teaching, finding joy in the eager faces looking up at her. One student in particular caught her attention, a serious-faced boy of about 12 who introduced himself as Thomas Parker. "Are you related to Preston Parker?" Rebecca asked. The boy nodded. "He's my uncle. Pa says he's the best tracker in the territory." "I met your uncle recently," Rebecca said, trying to keep her voice neutral. "He seems like a very capable man." Thomas beamed with pride. Uncle Preston taught me to ride and shoot. He promised to teach me tracking when he gets back. When he gets back, Rebecca tried not to sound too eager for information. Pa says he and the marshal are after Jed Hawkins. Uncle Preston told Pa not to expect him for at least a week. A week. Rebecca's heart sank. A week of wondering if Preston was safe, a week before she might see those blue eyes again, but she forced a smile for Thomas's benefit. Then we'd better make sure you learn plenty to impress him when he returns. The days passed slowly. Rebecca immersed herself in teaching, quickly earning the respect of both her students and their parents. In the evenings, she would often sit on the porch of the boarding house where she had moved after her first week, looking out toward the distant mountains and wondering where Preston might be. On Saturday, 9 days after Preston's departure, Rebecca was shopping at the general store when a commotion outside drew her attention. She stepped onto the boardwalk to see a group of riders entering town. At their head rode Preston, looking trail-worn but unharmed. Beside him was another man with his hands bound, whom Rebecca assumed must be Jed Hawkins. Relief flooded through her. Preston was safe. She watched as he delivered his prisoner to the jail, then spoke briefly with the marshal. When he turned and saw her standing there, his whole demeanor changed. The weariness seemed to lift from his shoulders as he strode toward her. "Miss Zimmerman," he said, removing his hat, "I hear you've been making quite an impression on the children of Silver Creek." "Mr. Parker," she replied, unable to stop the smile spreading across her face. "I hear you've been making quite an impression on the outlaws of Wyoming Territory." His laugh was like sunrise after a long night. "Got him, finally. Jed Hawkins won't be troubling anyone for a long time." "I'm glad," Rebecca said softly. "I was worried about you." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, followed by warmth. "Were you now?" "Yes," she admitted. "Very much so." Preston glanced around at the busy street, then back to her. "I don't suppose you'd be free for dinner tonight. There's a conversation I believe we left unfinished." Rebecca's heart fluttered. "I would like that very much. I'll call for you at 6 if that suits." "It suits perfectly." As Preston walked away, Rebecca caught sight of Mrs. Simmons watching from across the street, a knowing smile on her face. Rebecca couldn't even bring herself to be embarrassed. Let the town talk. For the first time in her life, she was following her heart rather than convention. That evening, Preston arrived at the boarding house precisely at 6, wearing a clean shirt and polished boots. He had trimmed his beard and combed his hair, though it still fell rakishly across his forehead. In his hand, he held a small bouquet of wildflowers. "These aren't as grand as the roses in the mayor's garden," he said, presenting them to her, "but they reminded me of you. Wild and beautiful." Rebecca accepted them with a blush. "They're perfect, thank you." He took her to the hotel restaurant, the finest establishment in Silver Creek. As they were seated, Rebecca noticed several townspeople watching them with interest. Preston noticed too and smiled ruefully. "By tomorrow, half the town will be speculating on our future," he said. "And what might that future hold, Mr. Parker?" Rebecca asked boldly. Preston's eyes grew serious. "That depends on you, Miss Zimmerman. I know it's only been days since we met, but I can't remember feeling this way about anyone." Rebecca's breath caught. "Feeling what way?" "Like I found something I didn't even know I was looking for." He reached across the table, hesitantly taking her hand. "When I was tracking Hawkins, all I could think about was getting back to Silver Creek, getting back to you." "I couldn't stop thinking about you either," Rebecca admitted. "It's rather alarming, actually. I've always prided myself on being sensible." Preston's thumb traced circles on her palm. "There's nothing sensible about the way we met. Maybe this isn't meant to be sensible either." After dinner, they walked through the quiet streets of Silver Creek, the setting sun painting the buildings in gold and crimson. Preston told her about capturing Hawkins, about the Rocking Pea Ranch where he'd grown up, about his father's hope that he would settle down and take over the operation someday. "And now," Rebecca asked, "are you considering it?" Preston stopped walking, turning to face her. "I've been restless for a long time, Rebecca. Always looking for the next horizon, the next challenge, but these past days, chasing Hawkins, all I wanted was to come back here." He took both her hands in his. "To you." Rebecca looked up into his blue eyes, seeing a future she hadn't dared imagine. I came west looking for a new beginning. I never expected to find it quite so quickly. Is that what I am, a new beginning? I think you might be. Preston leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, but Rebecca rose on her tiptoes, meeting him halfway. His lips were soft against hers, the kiss gentle and questioning at first, then deeper as she responded. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, and Rebecca felt as though she was finally where she belonged. When they parted, Preston rested his forehead against hers. I should get you back to the boarding house before Mrs. Cleary sends out a search party. Rebecca laughed softly. She did mention something about propriety and curfews. As they walked back hand in hand, Preston grew thoughtful. Rebecca, I don't want to rush you. I know you've only just arrived in Silver Creek, only just started your teaching position, but I want you to know my intentions are serious. As are mine, she replied. Though perhaps we should take some time to know each other better before making any permanent decisions. Preston nodded. Wise as always, schoolteacher, he smiled down at her. But know this, I intend to court you properly, Rebecca Zimmerman, if you'll allow it. I would like nothing better, Preston Parker. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Rebecca's life. Preston called on her regularly, always bringing small gifts, a book of poetry, wildflowers, once even a kitten he'd rescued from a storm drain. They took picnics by the creek on Sundays after church, rode out to see the spectacular vistas of the surrounding countryside, and spent quiet evenings on the boarding house porch, talking until Mrs. Cleary pointedly cleared her throat from inside. Rebecca flourished as a teacher, earning the respect of even the most skeptical parents. Preston divided his time between the rocking P and his duties assisting the marshal, but he never again left on extended tracking missions. When asked about it by the marshal, he simply said, "Found something worth staying for." As summer turned to fall, Preston invited Rebecca to Sunday dinner at the Rocking P to meet his family. She accepted with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Preston had spoken warmly of his father and brother, but this felt like a significant step. The Rocking P was impressive, a sprawling ranch house with a wide veranda, surrounded by well-maintained outbuildings and corrals. As Preston helped Rebecca down from the buggy, the front door opened to reveal a tall, gray-haired man with Preston's blue eyes and a younger version of Preston who could only be his brother. "Pa, James, this is Miss Rebecca Zimmerman," Preston said, pride evident in his voice. "Rebecca, my father, Patrick Parker, and my brother, James." Patrick Parker stepped forward, taking Rebecca's hand in both of his. "So you're the young lady who's finally tamed my wild son. It's an honor to meet you, Miss Zimmerman." "The honor is mine, Mr. Parker." "Your son speaks very highly of you," James grinned, clapping his brother on the shoulder. "He speaks of little else but you these days. It's Rebecca this and Rebecca that until we're ready to toss him in the horse trough." Preston's ears reddened. "That's enough, James," Patrick chuckled. "Come inside, Miss Zimmerman. Sunday dinner is a tradition at the Rocking P." Rebecca was surprised to find Thomas inside, helping a plump, cheerful woman set the table. The boy grinned when he saw her. "Miss Zimmerman, did you know my pa built this table himself?" "Thomas, let your teacher breathe," James said, ruffling his son's hair. "She's here as Uncle Preston's guest, not to hear about furniture." The meal was delicious, the conversation lively. Rebecca found herself drawn into the warm family dynamic, answering Patrick's questions about Boston and her teaching, laughing at James's stories about Preston's childhood mishaps, and praising Thomas's progress in school. Throughout the meal, Preston's hand would occasionally find hers under the table, giving it a gentle squeeze. After dinner, while the others retired to the parlor, Preston asked Rebecca if she'd like to see the rest of the ranch. They walked together through the autumn afternoon, Preston pointing out improvements he'd made to the barn, the quality of the quarter horses they raised, the creek that provided water year-round. "You love this place," Rebecca observed. Preston nodded. "I do. I always have, even when I couldn't bring myself to stay." And now, he stopped, turning to face her. "Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." Rebecca, these past months have been the happiest of my life. When I met you, something changed in me. For the first time, I'm thinking about the future instead of just living day to day. Rebecca's heart beat faster. What do you see in that future? Preston took her hands in his. You, always you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I know we haven't known each other long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. He dropped to one knee, opening the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. Rebecca Zimmerman, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Tears filled Rebecca's eyes as she looked down at this man who had literally dropped into her life that fateful day on the stagecoach. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Preston Parker, I will marry you. His face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed through her tears. When he set her down, he kissed her with such tenderness that it took her breath away. I love you, Rebecca, he said, his voice husky with emotion. I think I've loved you since I first saw you looking up at me from that stagecoach. And I love you, she replied, my brave, gentle cowboy. When they returned to the house, hand in hand, Rebecca's new ring catching the late afternoon light, the family seemed unsurprised but overjoyed. Patrick embraced Rebecca warmly, welcoming her to the family, while James teased Preston about finally showing some good sense. Thomas was perhaps the most excited of all, delighted that his favorite teacher would now be his aunt. The wedding was set for Christmas, giving them time to prepare while allowing Rebecca to complete the fall term at school. The entire town of Silver Creek seemed invested in their romance, with well-wishers stopping Rebecca on the street to congratulate her and offer advice. Mrs. Simmons insisted on hosting a ladies' tea to introduce Rebecca to all the prominent women in the community, while the marshal organized a somewhat rowdier celebration for Preston at the saloon. As the wedding day approached, Preston and James added a wing to the ranch house, a private suite for the newlyweds, with large windows overlooking the mountains and a small study where Rebecca could prepare her lessons. It was Preston's wedding gift to her, a space that would be entirely their own. The night before the wedding, Rebecca sat with Mrs. Cleary on the boarding house porch, watching the snow fall gently over Silver Creek. I never expected any of this when I accepted the teaching position, Rebecca admitted. I thought I was simply starting a new chapter in my life, not completely rewriting my story. Mrs. Cleary smiled knowingly. The best things in life are rarely planned, my dear. When I came west as a young bride, I had no idea my husband would die of fever our first year here, leaving me alone in a strange land. But I built this boarding house, made a life for myself. Sometimes God's plans are better than our own. I'm nervous, Rebecca confessed. Not about marrying Preston, I've never been more certain of anything, but about being a rancher's wife. It's so different from anything I was raised to be. You'll learn, Mrs. Cleary assured her, and Preston doesn't seem to want you to be anything other than exactly who you are. That's rare, child. Treasure it. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, the world transformed into a glistening white wonderland. The small church was decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons, packed to overflowing with seemingly every resident of Silver Creek and the surrounding ranches. Rebecca stood at the back of the church, her arm linked with Mayor Simmons, who had offered to give her away in her father's absence. Her dress was simple but elegant ivory satin with a high collar and delicate lace detail made by Mrs. Simmons and the ladies of the sewing circle. "Ready, my dear?" the mayor asked kindly. Rebecca nodded, her eyes fixed on Preston standing at the altar. He looked devastatingly handsome in his dark suit, his hair neatly combed, his face shining with joy as he watched her walk toward him. When Mayor Simmons placed her hand in Preston's, Rebecca felt the same thrill she'd experienced during their first touch. Preston's fingers tightened around hers as they turned to face the preacher. "Dearly beloved," the preacher began, his voice ringing through the hushed church, "we are gathered here today in the sight of God to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony was brief but beautiful. When Preston slipped the gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, his hands trembled slightly, betraying his emotion. And when the preacher finally pronounced them man and wife, Preston's kiss was both reverent and passionate, drawing cheers from the assembled guests. The celebration afterward at the hotel was joyous music and dancing, abundant food and drink, toasts and well wishes from everyone in town. Through it all, Preston kept Rebecca close, his hand rarely leaving hers, his eyes returning to her face again and again as if he couldn't quite believe his good fortune. As evening approached, they slipped away from the party, boarding the sleigh that would take them to the rocking P to their home. Snow was falling again as they rode through the gathering dusk, nestled together beneath thick buffalo robes. "Happy, Mrs. Parker?" Preston asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Blissfully," Rebecca replied, snuggling closer to her husband, "though I may keep Miss Zimmerman for my students." "I wouldn't want to confuse them mid-year," Preston chuckled. "Whatever you wish, my love, though I must say I'm rather fond of how Mrs. Parker sounds." The rocking P was transformed in the snow, the windows of the ranch house glowing with warm light. As the sleigh approached, Rebecca could see that the front porch had been decorated with lanterns and evergreen garlands, a wedding gift from James and Thomas. When they reached the house, Preston surprised her by lifting her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. Inside, a fire blazed in the hearth, and the new wing was prepared for them, fresh linens on the bed, a bottle of champagne chilling in a bucket of snow, a vase of hothouse flowers on the dressing table. "Welcome home, Rebecca," Preston said softly, setting her on her feet but keeping his arms around her. Rebecca looked up at the man who had fought off bandits to save her, who had tracked down dangerous outlaws to make their community safe, who had opened his heart to her so completely. "I love you, Preston Parker. And I love you, Rebecca Parker, more than I have words to express." As the snow fell softly outside and the fire crackled in the hearth, Preston lowered his lips to hers, sealing their new life together with a kiss that promised forever. Spring arrived early that year, bringing with it new beginnings. Rebecca continued teaching, riding to and from town each day on the gentle mare Preston had given her as a wedding gift. The children thrived under her guidance, particularly Thomas, who blossomed with the additional attention he received at home from his new aunt. Preston divided his time between ranch work and occasional duties for the marshal, though he never again took assignments that would keep him away overnight. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, talking about their days and their dreams for the future. One such evening in late April, Rebecca set aside the book she'd been reading and took Preston's hand. "I visited Dr. Morrison in town today." Preston immediately looked concerned. "Are you unwell?" Rebecca smiled, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "Quite the opposite. We're going to have a baby, Preston, in November." The wonder that spread across his face was something Rebecca knew she would remember all her days. "A baby," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We're having a baby," Rebecca nodded, tears of joy spilling onto her cheeks. "Are you happy?" Preston gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most precious porcelain. "Happy doesn't begin to describe it. Rebecca, you've given me everything I never knew I wanted: a home, a purpose, your love, and now a child." He pressed his lips to her forehead. "How did I get so blessed?" As summer turned to fall, Rebecca's body changed, her belly growing round with their child. Preston was endearingly protective, insisting she reduce her teaching hours and helping her up and down from her horse. Patrick and James were equally solicitous, while Thomas was simply excited at the prospect of a cousin. The baby arrived on a snowy night in late November after a long and difficult labor. Preston paced outside their bedroom, driven nearly mad with worry as Dr. Morrison and Mrs. Simmons attended to Rebecca. When the first cry of his daughter pierced the night, he nearly collapsed with relief. Mrs. Simmons opened the door, her face tired but smiling. "You have a beautiful daughter, Mr. Parker, and your wife is asking for you." Preston entered the room with reverent steps. Rebecca lay propped against pillows, her face pale but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. She looked up as he approached, her smile brilliant despite her exhaustion. "Come meet your daughter," she said softly. Preston sat carefully on the edge of the bed, peering down at the tiny face nestled in blankets. The baby had a dusting of dark hair like Rebecca's, but when she opened her eyes briefly, he caught a flash of blue. "She's perfect," he breathed, gently touching her miniature hand. The baby instinctively grabbed his finger, her grip surprisingly strong. "What shall we name her?" "I was thinking of Eleanor," Rebecca said. "After my grandmother, Eleanor Patricia Parker." Preston nodded, too overcome to speak for a moment. That Rebecca would honor his father with their daughter's middle name touched him deeply. "It's beautiful. She's beautiful." He leaned down to kiss Rebecca's forehead. "You're both beautiful." As winter settled over the rocking pea, the Parker family adjusted to their new addition. Eleanor Ellie, as she was quickly nicknamed, had her father wrapped around her tiny finger from the start. Preston would walk the floor with her for hours when she was fussy, singing old cavalry songs in his deep voice until she fell asleep against his shoulder. Rebecca returned to teaching in the spring, bringing Ellie with her. The schoolchildren were enchanted by the baby, and Rebecca found ways to incorporate her presence into lessons, counting Ellie's fingers and toes for the younger students, explaining infant development to the older ones. Life settled into a sweet rhythm. The rocking pea prospered under the combined efforts of Patrick, Preston, and James. Rebecca's reputation as an exceptional teacher grew, drawing students from farther away. And Ellie thrived, growing into a curious, adventurous toddler with her father's fearlessness and her mother's intelligence. On the third anniversary of the day they met, Preston surprised Rebecca with a picnic at the very spot where the stagecoach had been attacked. It was transformed now, wildflowers carpeted the ground, and birds sang in the trees. Only the ruts from the stagecoach wheels remained as evidence of what had happened there. "Why here?" Rebecca asked as Preston spread the blanket beneath a cottonwood tree. "Because this is where our story began," he replied, helping her sit. 2-year-old Ellie immediately toddled off to examine a colorful butterfly, staying within her parents' watchful sight. 3 years ago today, I was riding along that ridge and spotted bandits setting up an ambush. I had no idea my whole life was about to change." Rebecca smiled, watching their daughter. "I was so frightened when those bandits surrounded the coach, and then suddenly there you were, dropping from the sky like some avenging angel." Preston laughed. "Hardly an angel. Just a man who couldn't stand by and watch innocent people harmed." He reached for her hand. "I knew there was something special about you the moment I helped you down from that coach, but I never imagined how completely you would change my life. For the better, I hope," Rebecca teased. "In every way." Preston's face grew serious. "Before you, I was just drifting, Rebecca, doing good work with the marshals, yes, but never putting down roots, never allowing myself to truly belong anywhere. You changed that. You gave me a home, a family." He gestured toward Ellie, who was now carefully picking wildflowers. "A future." Rebecca leaned over to kiss him softly. "And you gave me the courage to become who I was meant to be, not the proper Boston lady my parents wanted, but a woman who could make a difference, who could love completely." As the sun began to set, painting the Wyoming sky in spectacular colors, Preston gathered his family close. Ellie nestled sleepily between them, her dark curls spilling over her father's arm, her mother's locket clutched in her small hand. "I love you, Rebecca Parker," Preston said, his voice low and fervent. "More today than yesterday and less than tomorrow." Rebecca rested her head on his shoulder, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. "And I love you, my brave cowboy, forever and always." In the years that followed, their family grew. A son joined them 2 years after Ellie, then another daughter 2 years after that. The rocking pea expanded, becoming one of the most successful ranches in the territory. Rebecca eventually opened a proper academy in Silver Creek, educating generations of children who went on to build the growing state of Wyoming. But through all the changes, all the challenges and triumphs, Preston and Rebecca remained at the center of each other's worlds, the schoolteacher from Boston and the cowboy who had fought off bandits with his bare hands, brought together by fate and bound by a love that only deepened with time. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the house was still, they would sit together on the porch of the home they had built, hands intertwined, watching the stars come out over the land they both loved, grateful for that fateful day when bandits surrounded a stagecoach and changed their lives forever.